Hello and welcome to episode 6 of VGM Moments, a podcast dedicated to memorable pieces of video game music. I'm your host Steve Vancouver, and as usual, we'll be talking about those musical moments in games that left a mark and stuck with us due to how they were used, the emotions attached to them, or just because they're mighty fine pieces of music. This episode, I'm joined by a very talented podcaster who has been talking video game music either on public radio in Minnesota or on her own show since 2011, interviewing composers, sound designers, and even fans about their love of the music and their new projects, all of which have been a great inspiration for this show. I'm delighted to welcome Emily Reese to the show. Emily, welcome.
Why, thank you, Steve. Hello.
How are you doing today?
I am doing well, thank you. Yeah, it's a good day.
Excellent. Like I said, thank you so much for joining me. I guess the first place to start really is obviously you started your show in 2011, but how did your passion and interest for video game music start? What was the starting point?
Well, I've always really loved just music. I mean, from the time I was a baby, I was dancing and really showing an interest in anything musical. And so I think just by default, any kind of media that had music in it, I was kind of automatically drawn to that music as well. And I didn't really get a lot of opportunities to play video games when I was a kid. I grew up in the 80s. And so I didn't have my own system until I got a PS2 in, I don't know, like 2002 maybe? 2000, yeah, I think. And I didn't really know where to start in games at that point either. And so the games I ended up playing initially were games that had a lot of licensed music in them, like Grand Theft Auto or Driver or some sports games, things along those lines, because I was just trying to kind of find my identity as a gamer as an adult, you know, because I was just thinking, well, this is the kind of stuff I liked as a kid, whatever. And, you know, it really wasn't until the mid-2000s, I'd say, when I got to play Oblivion for the first time that I realized kind of what music was like. You know, I hadn't played any of the Halo games by that point, so I wasn't really familiar with the tradition that came before, the kind of things that were happening at that time, you know, and so I just really latched onto that, being a classical music lover, and that on my own, you know, just really drew me to what was happening there. And so, you know, kind of from there, I just played a lot more games. I got into Assassin's Creed. That was about the first time the first game came out. And, you know, the music in those is absolutely amazing. And it just kind of slowly grew from there. There was none of this like, oh, I played Super Mario my whole life. And, you know, it wasn't anything like that. It was very slow.
That's brilliant. You started presenting your show, Top Score on Minnesota Public Radio back in 2011. How did that all come about?
That came about because, you know, I'd been working there for about 3 years at that point. And so I had friends there that I worked with that knew that I was a gamer and they were gamers, whatever. And I also kind of got an opportunity to interview Tommy Tallarico from Video Games Live. I got an opportunity to interview him for an article. And so I wrote the article. We posted the article on the website. And at the time, that's not the case anymore, but at the time, it was like the most visited article they'd ever had on the classical music website, like on the classical Minnesota Public Radio website. And as I've said, that's long since broken now, but at the time that was a big deal. And so they're like scratching their heads like, maybe there's something to these video games. And so Sam Keenan, who produces the show with me to this day, he and I were talking about it, and he's like, we should just do a podcast. And so that's how that started. And the article, I think, was in like maybe late January, February of 2011. And then by April, we had our first couple episodes up with like Enon Zur and maybe Peter McConnell, Jason Graves. I think we're kind of in that first batch, Gary Scheiman maybe as well. I mean, it was pretty crazy. And I mean, the thing that really was exciting about starting it was that, you know, these people, these composers were like dying to talk about their music. Like people just weren't interviewing them about it. You know, it's different now, but then it was like the very first person I tried to get on the show was Jesper Kyd. And so I emailed his PR agent, and by the end of the day, his PR agent had written back and said, like, well, Jesper's unavailable, but you could speak to Sean Murray, who just scored Call of Duty Black Ops, or you could speak to Gary Scheinman, who just did BioShock, or wait, maybe it was like Dante's Inferno or something that Gary had just done. I can't remember now. Or Jason Graves. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, no, you can't have this video game composer, but you can have these other 3 awesome ones. And it was just like right off the bat, we just got really fortunate. So yeah, it's kind of how that happened.
Yeah, it's a shame because I never actually got to listen to that show. With being in the UK, I couldn't find a way to listen to that.
Oh,
but
what?
I know it's a travesty, but
yes.
Thankfully I can now listen to your new show, which you started once you finished your show on Top Score in 2015. You started your Patreon.
Yep.
How did you find the jump from radio to a dedicated podcast?
Traumatic, disastrous, earth-changing, life-ending. It was pretty scary, and a lot of scary things kind of happened between me and the company toward the end that made us have a pretty rough start. And we basically started broke. We had been given permission to take the name and all the social media accounts, and that changed about 7 days before I quit there.
Oh, wow.
So that meant we were starting from scratch, and we didn't have any resources to do that. We didn't have any resources to do that. So it was pretty tough. And, you know, even now we still really struggle just money-wise. You know, it's tough. And I think the biggest struggle for us, you know, we know how to make a really good show. We've both worked in radio for so long now and worked on all kinds of different audio projects. And, you know, we know what we're doing with that, but the technology is what's slowing us down now. Like, it takes us at least twice as long to do a show as we could do it if we had laptops that worked, software that worked, hardware that worked. So that part gets really frustrating, and sometimes it's just kind of almost demoralizing. It's like, oh my God, this audio, I should have been done with this 4 hours ago, you know? But we still love doing it, you know? It's like there's never been one half a second where we've even thought we would stop doing it. You know, we really enjoy doing it. We love the people we talk to. And as far as the show we make now, we're so much happier with what we get to do now than what the kinds of things that we could do at NPR, because we were really limited there. I mean, first of all, I worked for the classical station, and so the content was pretty limited. Like, I had to try as often as possible to have live orchestral scores or something that sounded really close to it. You know, I couldn't really do electronic music or, you know, any like Fez or anything like that would mean I was taking a risk, you know, and we don't have to worry about any of that anymore. And we also can just interview any kind of audio person that we want. It doesn't have to be music based. Like, there are huge pros that far outweigh the cons of doing this on our own. You know, I mean, we've started offering more content, and that's kind of drummed up a little bit more support for us financially. But as you know, when you create content and you put it out there digitally, people want it for free. And it's just a constant struggle, you know, because it not only costs us a lot of time, but, you know, like today, I broke a hard drive that has all kinds of stuff on it that I need for interviews for a show this week. And, you know, we're going to have to go and figure out a way to replace that or get it fixed. And it can be kind of a struggle, but again, never enough of a struggle to make us not want to do it. So, yeah.
Well, I can highly, to the audience, if you haven't heard the Emily's podcast, I highly recommend it. Really good one-on-one interview style with it's brilliant. Really good content.
Oh, but thank you. That's very kind. Yeah.
So I'd recommend anyone to check that out. But in the meantime, we'll go on to the reason you are here, which is your list of 5 video game music moments.
Yes.
And your first pick is from a score which is one of my personal favourites.
Nice.
So I am very excited to talk about it. So let's have
Cool.
a listen and we'll have a chat. That was Still Human from Remember Me by Olivier de Rivière. Emily, tell me why this is one of your VGM moments.
Well, what's funny is, I might have cheated a little bit on this list because I never really even got that far in this game. Like, I found it a little frustrating, to like some of the mechanics, and I thought that the idea of the game was really good. And had a lot of promise, but I just kind of struggle with the mechanics. What did you think of it, playing it?
The game itself is fine. It's serviceable, but I liked how everything, especially the music side as well, but the memory reconstruction side of it, I just love those parts so much, and I wish there was more of that.
Huh.
But there was lots of combat-y stuff as well, which wasn't super good. But
Yeah. I just thought his score was really cool, and I think that Olivier does a really good job of stretching himself into new areas. Like, he did the DLC for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag Freedom Cry, or I guess it's just Assassin's Creed 4 Freedom Cry. I can't remember what their official name is for it, but some of the DLC for that game, and that was amazing. That was like all, I want to say, Haitian music, and he found this choir and all these musicians, and for Remember Me, it was all orchestrated, and then he went back and took those recordings and then like remixed them and stuff, which I thought was really creative. And I think there's a lot of spots where it's pretty straight ahead what he recorded, but then I think there's also spots where it's completely unrecognizable from what the original recording was. And he just did some really, really cool stuff. And that track, I love the slides in the string instruments. I think is really, really cool. It gives it this really, sneaky. I don't want it to sound trite by saying sneaky, but like, it just gave it just a little extra character. And I thought that was a really cool piece from that soundtrack.
Yeah. Olivier sort of has a little, it's one of his traits, it's a habit for him really, looking for those interesting concepts in games, like the memory reconstruction side of it. So it's got the electronic synth remixing of his orchestral work for that, and they've got Alone in the Dark he did, and Get Even. It's like his thing really, isn't it? Yeah,
and Get Even, if you, or I'm sure you've heard some of it, but I mean, highly recommend people listen to that soundtrack. That is just phenomenal. And the thing about Olivier, and you can just tell, it's like if someone grows up playing orchestral music and only listening to orchestral music, and then they start listening to electronic music and they make an electronic track, you're going to be able to tell. And it might sound really cool, but you're still going to be able to tell the difference between that person's electronic track and someone who grew up playing electronic music and remixing it and making it and all of that, right? So I feel the same is true with Olivier's music, because he is very classically trained and very aware of that, kind of tradition of music. And you can just tell in his music. You can tell by the way he orchestrates things and the voicings he uses, and just the way he uses the instrument, the orchestra itself as an instrument is, it's just first class, and so I'm continuously impressed with what he writes. He just does a really good job.
Yeah, fantastic composer.
Yeah.
So, from one fantastic composer to someone equally as good and as prolific, and even more so. We'll have a listen to this piece from a game that's appearing now for the second time in the series. Let's have a quick listen, and we'll talk about it afterwards. That was Imperial Throne from The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim by Jeremy Soule. Emily, tell me a little bit about your history with this piece of music.
Oh, God. I just shake my head when I'm like, God, am I really going to put Skyrim on here? Because I mean, what, this is your 6th episode?
Yes.
And you've already had it on once.
It was on our first episode, yeah.
Yeah, so be prepared because, I, as you mentioned, and thank you for mentioning that, sometimes we talk to patrons of our show, too, about their favorite music, and Skyrim appears on there from time to time as well. There are some normal suspects for sure, but the thing about this piece that I love so much, Imperial Throne, is there are a lot of things you can do with music to make it sound old, whether it's your instrument choice, the harmonies you use, because, Renaissance, anything pre-1600 basically had a different harmonic structure. It just did. Like, starting in around 1600 is when we got tonality how we know it today. So that really wasn't that long ago when you think of it. So everything before that, had different harmonies and resolutions, and so you can make music sound old by using that. Like I said, you can use the instruments, but you can also use like melodic techniques that they used in things like chant. And in this particular piece, Imperial Throne, one of the things Jeremy uses a lot, which I absolutely love, is this. It's called melisma or melismatic music. And that's the fluttery things, how it goes, bum, ba-la-la, ba-la-la-la, da-da, those kinds of things. And this is the way monks would sing. They would, hold a note and then do a little ornament on it or something, maybe hold it again and that kind of thing. And all of that would be over top of a drone. And that's what Imperial Throne is. There's this really subtle, but it's there, bass drone. And it just hangs out on that one tone the whole time. And then there are these two instruments, I'm not sure what they are. They sound kind of like English horns or maybe even like a duduk or something. It's a synthesizer for sure, but I'm not. And they just play off each other and do this duet with these melismatic turns. And it's just wonderful. I love that piece so much. I find it really beautiful, and that it just really nails this whole ancient sound that he has created always so well with Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, I tell you what, you have a lot more knowledge of music than I do. I could honestly, people who know what to talk about with music, I could listen to them all day about all this sort of thing. I would not have a clue to put this in writing, but that wonderful description.
Cool.
Have you mentioned earlier on you played a lot of Oblivion. Have you played a lot of Skyrim as well?
I did, yeah. And I have a Skyrim tattoo. It was like I almost flipped a coin to decide if it was going to be Oblivion or Skyrim. And it just came down to, okay, the dragon logo is just cooler. That's all there is to it. But yeah, the hilarious thing about me playing Oblivion, so whenever PS3 came out, when was that? 2005? 6?
2006, I think.
2006. Okay, I got one like immediately because I graduated from grad school. My grandma gave me $500. I spent it all on a PS3, and then some, right? Because they were pricey.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And Oblivion was a launch title, and so I got that, and I got Fear, which was a launch title and was way too scary for me to play. So the only thing I could play was Oblivion, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know I could heal myself until my second playthrough. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
I spent dozens of hours in that game, like, suffering because I just didn't know you could, like, do magic to heal yourself. I didn't know how to enchant until the second playthrough. It was just like a complete clueless person going through this game. And so once I figured all that stuff out, then I ended up doing a few more playthroughs of that game and really, really enjoyed it. And then Skyrim, it was funny because in Oblivion, I started off like melee character because I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, well, a sword looks good. Brr, let's bash around with a sword. And so that was kind of how I ran the first time. And actually maybe the first couple times, that's how I did it. But then by Skyrim, I was really into archery. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is Elder Scrolls, is being archer. And I usually roll Wood Elf, and I played through Skyrim. I don't know if I finished it twice, but I have a couple, 3 pretty lengthy playthroughs in various places. So
fantastic.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And the music is great. And I played Elder Scrolls Online for a while too, and I thought Brad Derrick has done a really great job with that soundtrack, keeping it, as true to the sound of that world as he can. And I think he writes some really beautiful music. And that was just an interesting thing. I think I probably would still be playing ESO if they didn't force you to have friends to get dungeons done. That's the only thing that stopped me from getting very far in that. So
that's a shame.
Yeah.
Jeremy himself, it looks like he's got a few works coming up. It's interesting. He looks like he's mostly going to be working on VR, from what he's saying. Have you tried VR stuff before, or does the music side of the VR interest you?
It does. It really does, because, it's been in probably the last 6 or 8 months that we've started finally having composers be able to talk about projects they've been working on for the last couple of years. Because you know how it is. They can't, they work on these projects for a couple of years and can't talk about them till like the very end. And so now VR has been out for a couple of years, long enough that all those projects are kind of starting to come to fruition now. And so we're able to speak with these composers, and it's just been fascinating to talk to someone like Marty O'Donnell or Enon Zur. These are guys who have been doing video game music for decades, and to hear their perspective on it compared to someone like Kenny Young, who has also been in game audio for a long time. He was with Media Molecule through, all the Little Big Planet stuff, and wrote a lot of music and did all the sound for those, and worked with them on numerous projects. But to hear him talk about the VR game that he did, I think it was in the fall of last year, and I'm blanking on the name, sadly, but it was amazing to hear him talk about how integrated they made it. It's almost like, he definitely wrote music, but so much of the music was really more like sound effect based on how your character interacted with the environment. And so that there seems to be kind of a little bit of a war, like I'll hear composers say, well, people say it doesn't work just to have static stereo music in VR. And then other composers are like, well, if you think about it, that's how we hear music all the time anyway, is in stereo. And, it's a soundtrack. It's not going to take you out of the experience, or it will take you out of the experience. It's interesting. I think honestly, I don't think it matters one bit. I think, it matters how good the game is and how they implement the music. But I think there are going to be really great examples of music that is completely reactive to the environment and music that is very background. I think it's been really cool to talk to them about it. But no, I haven't tried any really very much at all. I don't have it. It's super expensive. I think a lot of people don't have it for that reason. And, also space, like I'd have to move a table every time, I don't know. But mostly it's money. I would definitely have one if I could afford it. I think it'd be really cool to try. But yeah, I don't know. There have been some really neat soundtracks already, and it's going to get crazy. People are going to do some really amazing stuff.
Absolutely.
With it. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll go on to your next piece now. This piece is one of the ones you probably wouldn't have got away with playing on top score. So let's have a listen and see what to say about it.
Sunset.
That was Zero Dark 100 from the game Pinout by Douglas Holmquist. Emily, I have never played this game. Tell me a little bit about it.
Oh, it's a mobile game. You should. It is super fun. It's a really fun, endless pinball game, basically. So you get to the top of the table, and then you can just keep playing up, and it scrolls up and scrolls up. And I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the 80s. And so this kind of music is the kind of music that I grew up hearing in media and all that kind of stuff. And so to hear it done this well is really cool. And, you know, I think another really great example of this type of writing would have been the DLC for Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon.
Oh, yeah.
That was a band called Power Glove, I think, and they did a fantastic job. But Doug Holmquist, Swedish, I think. I'm pretty sure he's Swedish.
I believe so.
Yeah, and he got this friend of his to sing, and she's just got like this perfect voice, like the kind of voice like you don't want to know what the person looks like because you just want to picture them as this perfect little fairy goddess in your mind for the rest of your life. And she's a great keyboard player, and she plays on some of the tracks as well. And I just think he captured that whole atmosphere from the 80s, and, you know, being pinball, and pinball was such a big deal back then. I wasn't into it. I didn't, whatever, but just the stylization of the game itself, it's all this neon with all these great colors, and it's very much a nostalgic pull for me. But I think he wrote some really great 80s, like, new wave synth or whatever they call it. I think it's great. I listen to it a lot. I just drove to Iowa to see my family over the weekend, and I was listening to it on the way down there. It just like totally holds up. I think it's a great soundtrack and a fun little game too.
Fantastic. I might have to give it a go.
Yeah, you should give it a try. It's fun, and I think it's like only like $1.99, or it's totally worth it. They've made a lot of really cool games, that team. So yeah, and Douglas has done the music for all of it.
Yeah, I had a look at a bit of Doug's history. He's mainly worked for mobile games.
Yes.
The quality of mobile game soundtracks, do you think they're generally a little bit overlooked based on compared to like AAA titles or even indie titles? Because there are some really good soundtracks there.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, let's put it this way. If I play an indie game and the soundtrack is bad, I'm surprised. Mm-hmm. If I play a mobile game and the soundtrack is great, I'm surprised. Okay? So it's like I kind of definitely have lower expectations for mobile games. Obviously, some composers, you know, you gain a familiarity with, and you're like, oh my god, this mobile game is coming out and so is doing the music, and it's going to be great. But I think generally speaking, you know, I would say more so than anything, mobile games, a lot of them are just out there to make a buck, and they just don't care what the music sounds like. And I think also more often than not, people aren't even listening with the sound. You know, when I play Pinout, I almost never have the sound on, or almost never have my headphones on. The majority of the time when I'm hearing that music, it's because I'm listening to the soundtrack. So, you know, it's just a totally different beast. Yeah, because they're also just there's AAA games that have terrible music, so, you know. And
that is true.
yeah. I don't know. But I think more often than not, the music is kind of meh in a lot of games. And, you know, they don't really make space for it all the time and stuff. Sure. So,
yeah. I also saw Pinout has received a vinyl release.
Yeah.
Is vinyl something you're interested in with video game scores or music in general? Is that something for you, for collecting or listening?
Not for me personally. I don't have a record player. I do love vinyl, and I love that it's come back. I love, first of all, I just love the jackets that it comes in. So I've got some of those hanging up. Like I've got a BioShock
lovely.
Collector's edition, I think, from BioShock 2 that's really cool record. And I've got some old records from when I was a kid that I just love the art. But, you know, I don't mess around much with it, no.
That's fair enough. Yeah, it looks like a really nice... I think it's purple. It must be purple. It's based around the game, I think. But yeah, it's a nice looking vinyl, I believe. So
yeah, big time.
Yeah, we'll jump on to your next next title now. Very different from what we've just heard, but a very good piece. Let's have a listen and we'll have a little chat about it. That was AD from BioShock Infinite by Gary Scheinman. Emily, can you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, this one does have a really fascinating point in BioShock Infinite if you played the game, and it's a spoiler moment, so I can't talk about it too much, but it's a little bit of a reveal, and as are the actual kind of initials of the song title, AD. But, and I've talked about this one before, and I really debated. I'm like, do I pick something different? And no, this piece is just way too cool. It's way too cool because, I mean, the whole soundtrack of BioShock Infinite will always probably be like on my Desert Island list. I think it's just absolutely brilliant. And he recorded it with such a small string ensemble. I think, maybe 6 or 8 strings. And if he wanted more sound, he would just have them recorded again and put those things together to, they call that a second pass or doubling or molting. There are a lot of different ways to call it that. But, just this really small group which brought this level of intimacy and intensity, in my opinion, because he asked them to play kind of rough at times and not always be beautiful. In this particular track, I don't think that's as much the case, but there are other times where you'll hear the string players kind of like sawing on the strings, like really with a lot of pressure, not necessarily how you would hear them play like the Dvorak cello concerto or something like that. And so it's a neat way that he asked them to play. And then this piece, just the way it builds up and has such energy and perpetual motion, is pretty cool. And when the cello comes in like 3 or 4 seconds in, it comes in pretty early, and it's just this bass sound. It's just this boom, 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 boom. It's just, I just love it. I think it's really cool. And yeah, just a really neat piece. And again, another composer who you can just tell is really well versed in orchestral music and how to write for those instruments.
Definitely,
it's pretty impressive. I love that tune.
I think as well, like he's really well versed in orchestral side of it, but I think he's also really well versed in the world, considering he was with BioShock 1, BioShock 2, all the way through the series. Do you think how important do you think that is for games that have like a composer going from the start through to the end of a series?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question, because let's talk about Mass Effect. That's a good one to talk about, because there was a core team in the beginning with like Jack Wall and Sam Hulick, Richard Jakes, but the game was so big, they keep having to add composers and bring in more people, and it becomes almost impossible to keep the same people on the same project. And it's not so much that the music suffers, because they all still write really great music, but I think it loses some cohesion when there are multiple people on a project like that. Now with BioShock, Gary isn't the only person who does music for that. Jim Bonney also does music for that, and Jim, I believe, is it kind of heads up perhaps all of the licensed portions of it. I could be misspeaking here, so don't quote me, but Jim is also a really big part of that as well, and those two work together and do some composition together, and that's always been the case with BioShock. And you can tell there is that thread, but they also don't have 7 composers on the game.
Sure.
I think that tends to be much bigger of a problem than, replacing composers midstream, because let's take, for instance, Jeremy Soule to Brad Derrick. Brad is coming into this job knowing that he is trying to not necessarily copy Jeremy by any stretch, but kind of, adopt that atmosphere again and then create music from that palette of sounds, And that's kind of what composers are supposed to do anyway. They're asked to emulate something. Like, hey, this is what they might send them temp tracks. This is what we want the music to sound like, or you know what I mean? So they're very good chameleons, and I don't seem to think that's as huge of a problem switching midstream. I think, if we look at another series that's, sort of infamous for that, I would say Assassin's Creed, and I would say that the series suffered musically in some portions and has thrived in others. But again, that's those are really big games. So yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. Going back to the game, you mentioned the twists and turns at the end of it. What was your overall opinion of the game and story? Did you have a good time with it?
I loved it. I totally loved it. And I'm not some like uber BioShock, lore nerd by any stretch. I just really enjoyed it. I found the level of creepiness to be just perfect for me and my chicken ass. And I loved the sound. I thought all the sound was phenomenal. I loved that they scored the headshots, which is something I'll be talking about for the rest of my life. I just thought that was brilliant, how you get a headshot and there's a string hit. And I thought the combat was great. The weapons were fun. The magic was cool. The story was awesome. The graphics were great. Yeah, I thought it was really, really fun. And I've been wanting to play it on PS4. I haven't done it yet, but it's on the list because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, the ever-growing list.
Of course, always. It's always only going to get bigger, not smaller, that's for sure.
So we'll go on to your last game now, which is, again, a game I haven't actually played. I know the series, but never
you can
played.
Save yourself the trouble. You don't have to play it.
So we'll have a listen, and then, let's get straight into it. That was Makers in the Outlands from Darksiders 2 by Jesper Kid. Emily, could you tell me why this is your last VGM moment?
Yes. This is another example where I probably kind of cheated because, I mean, I guess I did have a moment when I first started this game. And this was unfortunate, this game, because it was so close to being such a cool game, and they just didn't quite get some things right. But Jesper got everything right, as he usually does. And it's funny to me that I picked that track. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at it, last week, because we were thinking we were going to try and do this last week, and that didn't work. And as I was like prepping for last week, I was like, God, why did I choose that that one? Because it's two CDs or two discs, whatever, two sides to the soundtrack, and every single track on that first side is phenomenal. A lot of the stuff on the second side is just a lot of atmospheric stuff, so you don't get quite as much of the melodic stuff, but. Sure. Man, that whole first side is wonderful. And that track is a good demonstration of Jesper's ability to write just this really groovy, funky, chill track. And he's just so good at that funky, chill electronica and mixes it with live instruments. And I'm not sure exactly what's live in that particular track, but he does have tin whistle and violin or viola in there at times, and it's really beautiful, and it's just such a great soundtrack. And I thought, I did play a little bit of that game, and it was such a colorful game, beautiful game, and that music was just spot on for that whole atmosphere and really, really pretty. And I do remember one of the first times I summoned my horse or whatever it is, and just sitting on this horse in this beautiful, lush green and purple and just brightly colored universe, and just sat there and listened to Jesper's music. He's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, his repertoire is quite incredible, really. Assassin's Creed, Borderlands, Hitman. It's Have you got a favorite of them, or?
I could have chosen something from any of those. I really, one of the ones that I don't think got as much attention as certainly could have or should have was his music for the Borderlands pre-sequel. Mm-hmm. Because that game kind of, I think diehard Borderlands fans played it, but I don't think it was quite as huge of a hit as they wanted it to be. Maybe I'm just making all this up, but I felt like the music he wrote for that was awesome, and I almost put on some tracks from that too, but yeah, he's just done such amazing work, and I think he's got some new stuff coming out, and that I'll finally get a chance to talk to him again, because it's been years. So he did a lot of TV for a while there, and some movies, I think, and so he just was kind of out of the.
Actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a bit, and so it's just really, and it wasn't that he just on purpose, he wasn't like, I don't want to do video games right now. That wasn't the case at all, but I think he just kind of naturally took a break from it, and I think he's been working on some stuff lately, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. Are there any other game soundtracks or any soundtracks, I guess, that you're really looking forward to?
Oh, ones that I'm looking forward to. Holy cow. Okay. Well, it's funny because I'm not quite sure entirely some of the things that, whether they've been announced or not.
Okay.
But I know I can say composer names, I just won't say games.
Sure,
I know
sure.
Gary Scheinman has something coming out this fall, and I'm very excited about that. Oh my God. Yes. I'm blanking on. Yes, there are things, and I'm so sorry, but I've been put on the spot, and I can't.
No problem at all.
Quite recall, but I do. I know that there are some people. It's their turn. It's been a while since we've had some people on because they've been working, and they're coming back, and I know Jesper is one of them, and I'm super stoked about that. I am kind of. I guess almost morbidly curious about what Destiny is going to sound like.
Sure.
That'll be kind of interesting to see what's going to happen there, and about 22 other games that I've completely forgotten now. But yeah. The best part to me about video game music is that certainly more than any other media or medium, they're really stretching the boundaries of what can happen musically in that kind of experience. And so I'm pretty pumped about that. Yeah. I'm pretty pumped about it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Emily, for joining me. It's been really interesting. Some great pieces as well.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to let people listening know about?
Yes, I would like to let you know that you should definitely support Steve and his podcast for all the hard work that he puts into it. It was a pleasure to speak with you. And, as far as us, you can find us on levelwithemily.com. And we're also on Podbean, which feeds to iTunes, and Patreon at /level. So patreon.com/level, podbean.com/level, and then levelwithemilyreese.com. Twitter @levelwithemily. We have special Discord chats for our patrons, and we talk a lot more in depth in there, and they get all kinds of extra content. And yeah, we're just... me and Steve are out here fighting the video game audio fight.
Well, yeah, as I said, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We've got our own Twitter and all that gubbins as well. You can find us at VGM_moments, or on YouTube as well. I think it's just VGM Moments. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud. Tap it in, you'll probably find it. And thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you'll join me next time for some more VGM Moments. Thank you very much.